Let me ask you about what the Senate's doing right now, which is passing a bill regarding the consumer agency that would overturn a auto lending law from the Obama administration. Do we anticipate that the House is going to follow suit?
Well, number one, we're happy anytime the Senate passes any bill. That is always news to us in the House. But now that I got that out of my system, yes, we are thrilled at this. The Orwellian name Consumer Financial Protection Bureau exercised a rule where they didn't have any lawful authority. It is clear in Dodd-Frank that they cannot regulate auto dealers, but they did it anyway. And so now the Senate has acted under the Congressional Review Act to overturn that rule. I have no doubt that the House will do it. Frankly, 18 months ago, we passed a freestanding bill with over 300 votes to do just this. And so, number one, we're going to follow the law. It will be easier to get a car loan. As soon as the Senate acts, the House is poised to act next week.
Worth noting, President Trump also voicing his support for that specific piece of legislation as well. All right, switching gears now. Earlier today, Vice Chairman Randal Quarles testifying before your committee. One of the things that I found interesting was that he said he would be open to reopening the comment period for financial institutions on stress tests. Your thoughts?
Well, number one, it was just great to have a vice chairman of supervision there. We've been waiting 8 years for him to show up. President Obama never nominated one, even though the law commanded that he did. So, number one, we're happy he showed up. Number two, yeah, there's been a lot of problem with the stress test. The rule of law works best when you know what the law is. And so, unfortunately, there's been no comment. The public can't know what's in these tests. Banks don't know what's in these tests. I mean, it's kind of like zooming down the road. You get pulled over by a cop for speeding, and you say, well, you know, what was the speed limit? I can't tell you that, sir, but you were violating it.
Is there a congressional fix that needs to be addressed in terms of reopening that comment period, or would that just strictly go through the regulatory czar?
No, it can go through the regulatory process, so the comment period does need to be open. But if necessary, Congress will need to act. I mean, these stress tests shouldn't be secretive. You know, the vice chairman said that he was committed to greater transparency. Part of the transparency is knowing what's in the stress test. The market needs to be able to react. The market which invests in these banks need to know that when banks are getting a passing or failing grade from the Federal Reserve, what's in the test, and let the market decide as well what the validity of the test are. And they're also very cumbersome. And by the way, the Fed has access to all this stress test data anyway. Banks are stress testing their assets daily, weekly, monthly. The Fed has access to this information, and they should use that as well.
Another key part of the hearing that kind of fits well with this is regarding tailoring of specific rules and regulations. What do you think is the next step for Mr. Quarles as he begins to really settle into his post? And what timeline could we see action on the type of policies that he supported, that he said that he supported this morning?
Well, again, I was very impressed with him. I was very impressed by his testimony, and I think where he wants to take this position, because let's face it, he's probably the single most important financial regulator in the nation. One might even argue the world. So it's a very important position that he has. Tailoring says, again, that the regulatory framework needs to be tailored to the size and complexity of the financial institutions. We know that the regulatory load has fallen disproportionately upon our smaller banks and our regional banks, and none of them have anything to do with systemic risk. So much of this, Kevin, he can do on his own discretion. Congress doesn't need to pass a new law. Dodd-Frank gave vast swaths of discretionary power to the Fed. Let them use it for good, and when I say good, let's let them use it to help us achieve long-term 3% economic growth as opposed to the 1.6% average economic growth of the previous administration.
Since we last spoke last week, there's been some reporting by Politico Pro that there has been instances of potentially ongoing conversations with Banking Committee Chairman Mike Crapo. Where do we stand with regards to advancing the Dodd-Frank deregulatory bill in terms of a timeline? Any new update?
Well, conversations continue between our committee and Chairman Crapo and frankly, Senate Democrats. We have a 3% tax policy in America because it could pass with a simple majority.
Happy tax day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's happier than usual, isn't it? 90% of Americans are seeing a tax cut. But unfortunately, anything that has to do with capital formation, financial intermediation, most of that takes a supermajority of 60 votes. So my point is, Kevin, you got to have a conversation with 8 self-styled moderate Senate Democrats. Those conversations are taking place today. Many of these Democrats have said that they want to help create jobs. They want more mortgages. They can't do that the way the bill is in the Senate today. It's a modest community bank regulatory relief bill, and I salute it and I applaud it for that, but it doesn't get us anywhere close to 3% capital formation.
Final question. I got to ask you about the speaker race. I know it's way far out and you will not be here when it happens, but who would you like to see? Your colleague Jim Jordan, or what about Chairman Mark Meadows? I mean, who would you like to see in that spot? Any names you can give?
How the time flies. I think I'm going to stay out of that one. Conveniently, I am retiring at the end of this Congress. Listen, you mentioned 2 personal friends of mine, 2 great conservative leaders in the House, but I think I will politely decline to answer that question.
Part of the negotiations of this ongoing back and forth with Dodd-Frank?
No, XM is not part of this.
So,
I wish it was, because I'd like to get rid of that vestige of the swamp and crony capitalism.
We will leave it there.